Hi everyone, my name is Mike Taylor and I'm Vice President of Americas here at C2C Systems. It's a couple minutes afternoon here on the East Coast and I wanted to just get us started for today's webinar, which is Managing Personal Archives for Critical IT Projects. Wanted to just start off with a couple of housekeeping announcements. First, Rich Turner, who usually gives our webinars and is our Strategic Business Development and Marketing Manager, was unable to be here today due to the fact that he's sick. So I'm sorry to those of you that came to hear Rich speak specifically. I'm going to try to do my best to pinch hit for him and do the best I can with the presentation. For those of you that have logged into the webinar session and you're looking for questions, to have questions answered, if you go into the Questions tab, there is the ability for you to ask questions. We'll take most of the questions at the end, and we should be able to get things answered for you as we go through the course of the presentation today. I appreciate your time and wanting to spend half an hour or so with us going through the personal archives issue and how people can manage them more effectively. We'll get started with the presentation now and hope to have plenty of time for questions at the end. Just a quick agenda for today, a quick explanation of what personal archives are, typical projects that are drivers for personal archives, virtual desktop implementations, and BYOD. And what we see is really the biggest trend around people wanting to find and eliminate PST folders or personal archives, the Office 365 migration, or migration to the next version of Exchange, whether that's 2010 or 2013, depending on your situation. We'll talk a little bit about some of the problems that we've seen, the common problems, and a little bit about our the end, which is our C2C's PST Enterprise solution. And of course, to have time for questions as well. What are personal archives? Many customers come to us and say, hey, we have a problem around dark data or personal archives that are out in our environment. And those problems are typically around PST files or personal storage tables, which allows email to be stored locally either on a hard drive or on a shared drive in a server, in your organization. These were available by default in Microsoft Outlook 2003 and 2007, and many organizations turned them on, perhaps inadvertently, even to allow people to store information locally so that they might have access to it. Many people also ask us, so why do we have these files out there? There is some use to them, and we see customers typically that will say to us, hey, you know, we deployed PST files or we allowed PST files to allow people to get around a mailbox quota, or if they were moving email between locations and people, or they were out on the road and they needed quick access to that information. They're definitely very easy to use and highly portable, which is why we see a lot of PST files out there in large corporate environments. When you talk about how widely are they used, this is kind of the big question for a lot of IT managers that we speak with. Many organizations actually don't know how many PST files they have out there, and there's a large swath of them that that can be uncoupled and are sitting on servers that are perhaps in a different segment than at the corporate office. Typically what we see is 2 to 4 PST files per active mailbox, which contain as many as 10,000 messages or 1 gig of data in each, which is a lot of data to have to move around if you're doing a migration or an upgrade. At the end of the day, from an IT perspective, PST files are not a good solution because they really allow for a number of risks to be put into your environment. They can be located anywhere, end-user devices or network drives. They're under end-user control, not under corporate control, so there's no retention policy, for example, being applied to them. There's no deletion of data, so there can be data in a PST file that's outside your retention, your corporate retention policy. And a lot of times they contain business-critical data. We've seen a lot of examples where there's been litigation that have come up where the data is in the hands of an end user but not in the hands of an organization. And from an IT perspective, they're not backed up or not supported. So that means if they become corrupt or a machine becomes corrupt that a PST file's on, that data has the the chance that it will be lost or misplaced, which is obviously another issue. And at the end of the day, the biggest thing we hear is that the PST file has been corrupted, so it can't be imported, it can't be moved. It's just got to be quarantined so that corruption can be fixed, and then you're able to move on with your migration or upgrade. So at the end of the day, from an IT perspective, they're not a very good solution to have in your environment. We see, as I mentioned on the first slide, that kind of a number of projects that really drive PST file elimination. The first is virtual desktop. So someone's doing a VDI implementation, and they need to get rid of the locally stored PST files to make that implementation actually work. That's usually the first thing that puts the brakes on a VDI implementation. In terms of BYOD, or bring your own device, it's not possible for these devices to store data locally. So the PST files really are an issue as companies look to roll out BYOD, secure BYOD policies. So existing data needs to be moved or it will be lost. Finally, the biggest driver that we see is Office 365 migration. So customers will come to us and say, we really want to take advantage of our cloud infrastructure and really want to put all our data in this particular bucket, if you will, of data, whether that be the archive mailbox in Office 365 or perhaps the primary mailbox. All that data needs to be consolidated centrally. And that's really the biggest driver that we see. And of course, the same rule applies for folks that are migrating to Exchange 2010 or 2013. They want to take advantage of the bigger mailboxes and bring all the data together. Finally, obviously, the biggest unintended consequence of PST files are Ediscovery and Edisclosure, as well as legal hold. So you'll see a lot of times with our customers is all relevant data that applies to a search or a discovery needs to be collected, identified, and secured. And in the case of the PST file, what that means is there'll be some data that will be existing on a PST file that may not be part of a discovery that you can do from a central corporate location. So you'll have to go out and do a special search of that PST file to find that information. But the important thing to note is that customers can't ignore the data that exists in a PST file, whether they support it from an IT perspective or not. It has to be included as part of that e-discovery or e-disclosure. Generally, PST files, the data that's out there is hard to put on legal hold, so it causes a problem for customers that get involved in litigation, whether it's external or internal investigations. It's worth talking a little bit about the Microsoft solution that exists here for personal archives or PST files. Microsoft will talk about or kind of really get you to think about as an IT manager is the Inplace Archive that exists in Exchange 2010 and Office 365. And that is really a replacement of the personal archive or personal storage tables that we're talking about here today. So that's their attempt to centralize the data and allow you to manage it from that location. And typically what they talk about there is unlimited storage. So you can have an archive mailbox that has, a large amount of storage space, say 5 or 10 gig, that would allow you to put that data from a PST file into that particular in-place archive. The user experience is similar, of course, because they see the data in their mailbox just like they would with a PST file. There are other solutions out there in this space as well to help you keep PSTs on centralized storage and then prevent users from creating PST files locally. And then there's third-party archiving tools as well. So we sell a solution called Archive One that helps people find, manage, and eliminate PST files, as well as archive live mail. And this provides secure storage and search solutions for business-critical data. It's important to note that other solutions, why did we build a solution, or why are organizations out there providing solutions to customers that are looking for PST file elimination and management? And of course, there's a few kind of best practices. I would say it's not advisable to keep PST files for all mailboxes, as we talked about it. It introduces unnecessary legal and compliance risks, as well as bloating your data storage. Ideally, you want to manage and eliminate these PST files, which is what our PST Enterprise solution does. It can be used one time or on an ongoing basis, depending on what your need is as a customer. From an implementation perspective, I'll just go through a couple of what we call basic rules of this for this practice. Locate, migrate, and eliminate. When we talk to customers about PST Enterprise, those are kind of the 3 rules that we try to get people to adhere to or just talk through. And these files, like we talked about, could exist on local drives or on shared drives out in the environment. The first challenge is locating PST files. A number of customers come to us and say, hey, we know where to look. We know these PST files exist on our network, and we know that there's a lot of them on shared drives and there's a lot of them on hard drives. But the problem really is how to look for them in a way that you know that you've captured all the information and you have a way to do something with it when you find it. So locating is really the biggest challenge. Of course, our tool can help you locate and run reports on where this data is, as well as tell you about the last time it was accessed, as an example, the file path it sits on, and a lot of other data about where the PST file is. But most importantly, it allows you to identify an owner or perhaps assign an owner based on the file content to that particular file. And then when you do that, you can make some intelligent decisions about what to do with the orphans. So you've got some files out there that might be orphans, and you can make some intelligent decisions about, hey, if there's X amount of the mail within a PST file from this particular person or to this particular person, we can assume that it's belonging to this person and then assign it to them. So locating is really the first step. The next step is migrating. And when you talk about migrating PST files, the biggest challenge is, that we try to get people to think through, is only migrate what you need to keep. In other words, if you have a 7-year retention on all your email, but you have PST data that's been out there for 12 years, well, that 5-year, that 12-year-old email or 11-year-old email, you might not need to keep that as part of your ongoing corporate retention or data you're going to retain. So you might want to just migrate what you need to keep and frankly, delete the rest of it. So that's one of the things that we try to get people to do, is really delete unwanted files or data that's not old or unimportant. And a term we see is redundant and obsolete data, right? So ROT, or redundant and obsolete, is really what we talk about there. The next thing is options for migration. So there's a number of different ways to move the data. The way that we've seen people try that frankly has very little success is ask the users to migrate them. So we've had a number of customers come to us and say, hey, we're going to set up a portal and ask our users to pick the PST files they want to migrate. And we just see a very low adherence to that policy. People don't have the time to do it. They're not interested in doing it. So we see that as kind of a recipe for failure. Another one is use Microsoft's PST capture tool. I feel like our solution, PST Enterprise, is really geared more towards the enterprise, given its name, but more than 500 users and above is really where our tool is very strong. If you're smaller than that, if you have fewer than that, you might be able to get away with using Microsoft's PST capture tool, which is, of course, a free tool. Third-party tools, of course, like ourselves. And then the most important thing around migration is managing the resource requirements, right? So the key thing that you need to think about there is bandwidth and storage. So whenever we talk to a large customer, they say, okay, how can I schedule my PST migration such that it doesn't interfere with the daily running of my business? Or I have a number of PSTs on a SAN out there, and I want to reclaim that space because I could use that storage for more important things. So people will really want to try to figure out ways to manage and best utilize those resource requirements, which our solution really does allow for. Now, finally, the last step, and really the most important thing, is eliminating PST files. The key thing to do is make sure you finish the job. So when the data gets migrated either back into an archive mailbox or perhaps back into a primary mailbox, make sure those files are deleted and that data goes away so that you don't have users that are confused and you can regain that storage space. Also, you want to, of course, create users from creating new files. And there are changes, as everyone knows, in Outlook and Exchange Group policy to make that happen. So we just need to make sure that people, when they do the elimination piece, make sure you finish the job. Finally, I'll just talk a little bit about our PST Enterprise solution. PST Enterprise is our PST discovery and migration solution. It allows you to locate PST files across the organizations, across your organization, as well as migrating PST files directly to Office 365, Exchange 2013, or a third-party archiving solution like ours. The key thing here is that's a single-step migration. So one of the things that we talk about there is you can move data with one hop to either the Inplace Archive in Exchange 2013, or perhaps the centralized storage and network location to consolidate that data. But there's no need to move the data twice in order to accomplish your goal of putting it back in the end user's mailbox or putting it in a centralized location where you're going to review it for legal and compliance purposes. Just in closing, a quick case study here about our solution that we've talked through a number of times. We work with a large insurance company up in Canada that has a very large PST problem. They had 5,000 workers across North America, and they had acquired another insurance company. And as part of that acquisition, they needed to consolidate a number of existing PST files from remote users into their central Exchange server. Without, of course, interrupting their day-to-day operation, and then, of course, include also their live mail as part of that. And what they were able to do with PST Enterprise was locate the files like we talked about, determine and assign an owner for each PST file. So for the orphans that they found, they were able to figure out who those PST files belonged to. They were able to delete some data that, frankly, was outside their attention and for users that were no longer there. They did some movement of the PST files into specific network locations for further review by legal. And then for the data that they wanted to ingest, only after they determined that the data was worthwhile to move, they were able to move them directly into Exchange. And here's a quick a quote from one of their IT directors there about our tool. One of the things that they were really able to leverage was our ability to do some scheduling within the product that allowed them to schedule those users' migrations based on particular Active Directory attributes that they wanted to leverage. I wanted to make sure I left some time for some questions, and that kind of took me through about 20 or 25 minutes. I see that there are some questions here, and I want to just make sure that I get to them. So the first one is, if you have a question, you'd like to ask, feel free to go into the questions tab here on your screen and go ahead and ask them, or in the chat tab if you'd like, just so I can see what the questions are. I've got a couple questions here. It looks like people have asked as we go through the presentation. Just the first one is regarding our solution, PST Enterprise, and price. So our solution, PST Enterprise, is people pay per the number of mailboxes that they have on their system, and basically we charge per mailbox, and they're able to buy the solution based on that. The solution is also the follow-up to that is it's available both as a perpetual license and a rental. So if you think you're going to need it for a longer period of time and you want to go ahead and buy the solution, that's fine. If you'd like it for a shorter period of time and want to just rent it, that's fine as well. Next one is about storage. So storage, someone had asked, does it matter? Doesn't matter, I'll try to paraphrase, doesn't matter where the PST is in the environment. So if it's on SAN or NAS or user hard drive, it doesn't matter, right? So that part doesn't matter to us. The product will go off and find the data that's on an individual user's hard drive. In the case of a network share, you effectively point the product out to network share, and it'll report back all the information that's out there in terms of PST files from those shares. Really appreciate a lot of great questions out here. I guess I'll take one more just in the interest of time, and of course, encourage everyone to visit us at c2c.com, or if you have specific questions or want to talk specifically about PST Enterprise as a possible solution for you, just go ahead and email me at mike.taylor@c2c.com or visit us at c2c.com and request a demo. Last question here, how do you identify a file as a PST? I assume you do more than just match a file extension. Yeah, that's correct. So we do have some more analytics underneath the product that allows you to go in and do that. And PSTs often are named differently, and our product can go off and discover those PST files discover the nature of those PST files. Great. So again, if there are other questions, we're happy to answer them, and happy to spend time if you have a project or you'd like to talk a little bit about how we can help you eliminate PST files with PST Enterprise. Feel free to either, again, email me, mike.taylor@c2c.com, or give us a call here in our office in Boston, and we're happy to spend some time with you and your team, and appreciate your time today. Thanks very much, and have a great day.